Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, Episode 21. In today's podcast, Jenn gives a number of tips on giving and receiving constructive feedback. Feedback in this sense may be defined as the return of information about the result of a process or activity, an evaluative response. Coincidentally, Jenn recorded this podcast on May 6, 2012. The same day as elections took place across Europe, where both French President Nicolas Sarkozy and the Greek governing coalition parties were thrown out of power in response to the economic austerity measures imposed by the European Union. It's not feedback quite at the level of the Boston Tea Party or the Russian or French revolutions, but it is instructive to note that we can all give and receive feedback without anyone having to lose their head.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Communication Diva. I'm Jenn Swanson, and this is the podcast that explores all areas of communication for both work and home. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. And if you've listened before, thanks for taking time out of your busy life to spend time here with me. I really appreciate you doing that. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic that can be challenging for many people at both ends of the subject, and that is the giving and receiving of feedback. So what is feedback exactly? And sometimes people are confused about this. It's not the same thing as giving advice. It's somewhat like criticism, only it's supposed to be performance related and helpful to the person receiving it. Feedback at work sometimes comes in the form of formal performance reviews, employee reviews and that kind of thing, or it can come spontaneously and as the need arises. Feedback can be both about how well you've done something or what the things are that need to be done to improve what it is that you're doing at work. So it can come in different forms. In the workplace, feedback doesn't even have to come from management to employee only. You can very easily give good feedback to a coworker, and by good, I don't mean necessarily praising them. What I mean is good feedback can simply mean effective feedback. And if done carefully, you can actually give feedback to your supervisors too, but carefully. This can be a top-down, a bottom-up, or a lateral experience. So anybody can give feedback to anybody. How well it works depends on your technique and depends on how well you receive it. At home, we give feedback all the time. And again, this isn't to be confused with advice. Feedback is performance-based, and it's given on what the other person did, not who they are as a person. So there are some very basic things to think about both with giving and receiving feedback. And let's look at the giving part first. This can again apply to workplace settings or home settings. The same principles apply to both. So the first thing is check your motivation. Why are you giving this feedback? And I used to say to the kids when they were little, are you telling me this to be helpful or to be hurtful? So why are you giving feedback in the first place? I had a professor at university who was getting unsolicited feedback every day on her outfit. And I don't know if I've told you this story already, maybe I have, but she every day would show up to work and she had a kind of funky way of dressing. And someone that she was working with every day would make some unhelpful comment, but couch it in the form of feedback about what she was wearing. And she would come up to her and say things like, oh, I just, don't want anyone to say anything, but your shoes don't actually match your skirt or something. Anyway, after a while, it became extremely annoying and it was hurtful. And the professor finally decided that she had to say to the person, I didn't ask for your feedback and I don't want it. Thank you very much. And that ended it. But the question there was, what was the motivation really of the person that was giving this unwanted feedback? So check your motivation. Why are you giving feedback to the person? The second thing is be timely. So give feedback as soon as you possibly can. Don't let it sit for days or weeks. Feedback is most effective soon after the event, as soon after as possible. And I remember thinking about my dog when I had a dog before she passed away. And if she got into the garbage, it was absolutely useless 8 hours later to be mad at her because she had no clue what you were raising your voice about. It had to happen immediately. And so give feedback to people as soon as you can as well, because it's easier to remember details that way, and it's generally more helpful. The next thing is to be aware of where you are when you give feedback, especially if it's negative feedback. It needs to be given somewhere private and not in front of everybody else in the room. It's not going to be very effective if you are embarrassing or humiliating somebody in front of a crowd. And it's hopefully you're not doing that anyway, but it could come across that way if there are a bunch of other people around. So the best thing to do is to be aware of where you are and take somebody off somewhere else. The other thing to do is to ask permission to give feedback, because the person may not be ready for it. So ask them if they're ready, and maybe make an appointment if you must. And then they'll be more prepared than being caught off guard for feedback. Another tip is to use I language. So talk about what you notice. Don't interpret or rationalize the actions or pretend you understand why the person did what they did. Just tell them what you notice and use your I language. I noticed this, etc. Be specific. So saying something like "you're not nice to me" is not helpful. Give detailed, specific instances that the other person can then address. Because if you're very general, it's not very effective. You need to be giving them concrete episodes that you can then discuss. Give feedback about changeable things. So telling somebody their nose is too big, for example, besides just being rude and maybe mean, is not helpful. And unless they're willing to undergo a lot of pain and financial investment, they can't change that fact. So feedback should be given on things that can be improved upon and changed. If you're giving negative feedback, try to give some positive feedback as well, but don't overdo it, because that seems to be a trend, is to give all sorts of good feedback and then tuck something negative into the mix. And sometimes if you have too many instances of positive feedback covering up a piece of really important, constructive feedback, the person listening will only hear the good stuff and will miss what it is you're really trying to get at. So be careful with that. It's good to start off maybe with one thing that's a good thing, and then quickly move into the purpose of the feedback that you really want to give the person. I'm just going to turn my page here while I'm reading. All right. The other thing you can do is ask the person for their reaction to what you're saying, because they may disagree completely or be completely unaware of the reason behind the feedback you're giving them. I had a student who was working, doing her clinical experience in an emergency room, which was a really busy environment to have a student in. And there was a lot that needed to be done, and people would come up and give her feedback or ask her if she'd done something. And she was really coming off as a know-it-all during this experience. She'd say, "Oh yeah, I know, I just forgot," or yeah, I got it. And anytime anybody corrected anything she did, she would make some offhand remark. And after several instances of this, people got annoyed and the gossip started. And unfortunately, she became labeled as knowing everything, and people were really unimpressed with this new student. So when I heard some of this feedback from other staff members, because I was, coming in as the supervising instructor, so they were going to come and tell me about this, I took her aside and I asked her if she knew how she was coming across to others in the department. And she was really actually horrified. She was really upset when she found out how it looked to everybody else in the department. What had happened is she had come from working in the kitchen, and she was terrified that the people she had worked with for years and years would think that she wasn't capable, or that she didn't know what she was doing, or that she wasn't going to be able to pull off making this transition to a more complicated job. So it had been quite a move from working on the tray lines in the kitchen to, reading doctor's orders and learning all the pharmacology and all the stuff that she had learned. And so her fears were not around proving that she could do the job to the staff around her. It was more that she was afraid that the people that where she had come from would see her fail. So she had sort of built this protective shell around herself, and any feedback or criticism given to her felt like an attack. And that's the way she was responding. And she was feeling protective. And it just came across to everyone else as being, a know-it-all or stuck up or something. So different perspectives, but find out what you're saying to people. Find out how it lands and ask them what their reaction is to the feedback you're giving them, and allow them to ask questions to clarify if they need to. So feedback can be a really valuable tool. And to end the story of this student, what happened was she went back to the department to finish her clinical, and she went back with a different eye. Her eyes were opened a little bit, and she went back with a different attitude and a different way of accepting feedback. And she actually did quite well in the end, but she just didn't realize, she didn't understand how she was coming across. So it was helpful to her to get the feedback from me that this wasn't looking very good. Okay, so those are some tips for giving feedback. And what about receiving feedback? That's the next thing. So there are fewer tips here for receiving feedback, but some of these might be helpful. So the first one is try to avoid being defensive. Listening is really important when receiving feedback, and listening with more than just your ears, right? So watch the other person, pay attention to their body language, and listen to their words, but also their tone of voice and all the other things that go along with that. So that's one thing, listening and trying to avoid being defensive, because it might take a few minutes for you to think about what it is they've said. The other thing is, if they say something that you don't understand or you don't agree with, get curious. Ask a lot of questions and be specific. So ask them what they mean by whatever it is they're saying to you, and ask for examples. Another way to look at feedback is to look at it as a gift. So it's a chance to improve upon what you're doing. And in a workplace, that's really important. If you're going to learn more, if you're going to grow, if you're going to become an expert in whatever it is you're doing, it can be really helpful to get feedback, because maybe you're going along and thinking everything is just fine, and maybe it's not. So it's really helpful to get the opinions of others, particularly your manager or your supervisor, and find out if there's something that you could be doing better to make yourself a more valuable employee. Being able to improve upon what you're doing is also a way to show that you are teachable and that you can accept constructive criticism, that you can improve. So look at it as a gift if you can. You also don't have to agree with feedback given. Not all feedback might be fair. like this professor and the feedback she was given on her outfits, that really didn't seem fair. If you can thank the person for their comments and be kind of non-committal about it, and you may actually need time to go away and think about it before you respond at all. So you might thank them for their comments and then go away and think about it. And if it isn't fair, then you might be able to say, I don't agree with the feedback that you've given me. And this is why, and give them some reasons why. But it might be better to take some time to respond rather than doing it right then in the moment. So giving and receiving feedback is a very important part of both workplace life and home life too. And we can't effectively let people know what's bothering us if we don't speak up. But the way in which we speak up can make the difference between feedback being a useful and effective tool or just a difficult and uncomfortable experience. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. I know that in our evaluation tools with the students that I teach, and I'm sure it's the same in performance reviews and employee reviews, one of the key things is often, how does this person receive feedback? And so the way in which you receive feedback is just as important as the way in which you give feedback to other people. So I hope this is helpful. And guess what? I would love to get your feedback. And whether it's good or not so good, I like to hear what you have to think about this particular episode or any of the episodes here at Communication Diva. So if you would like to do that, I would really appreciate it. And you can do that by coming to www.communicationdiva.com and leaving a comment there in the comment section. Or you can say something on Facebook, and the Facebook link is there. My Twitter feed is there as well. You can send me a tweet. Anything that you would, any way that you would like to. My email address is on the website as well. So I would really appreciate some feedback from you, the people that are out there listening to this. So until next time, I thank you very much again for listening. This is Jenn Swanson. Until next time.